Hey, now engineers out there, you ready for this? We're about to take a deep dive into a paper that has the potential to seriously change the game.
Oh yeah, this one's a big one.
It's called Generative Modeling by estimating gradients of the data distribution.
Catchy, right.
Well, maybe not catchy, but definitely important,
Hmm.
especially if you're, working with things like synthetic data or model robustness,
Hmm.
or if you're just, looking for some inspiration for some really cool new creative applications.
Yeah, all that. And it really gets at some of the really fundamental problems that we've had with generative models.
Like what?
Like, GANs can be a real pain to train, right?
Tell me about it.
And likelihood-based models, yeah, they can be really limiting in terms of the architectures you can use.
Okay, so this paper, it's trying to kind of break free from all that.
Yeah, it's proposing a whole new approach.
All right, so let's get into it. They start by talking about this thing called the manifold hypothesis. What is that all about?
So imagine you have, all the images that could possibly exist,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, all of them, every single one.
That's a lot of images. And
All
like
right.
in theory, they exist in this giant, high dimensional
The
space,
high dimensional meaning?
meaning like a space with a ton of dimensions, way more than we can even visualize.
Got it. So all possible images are out there, somewhere in this vast space.
Right. But the images that we actually work with, the ones that actually exist in the real world, they're not just scattered randomly throughout that
They're
space.
not.
No, they tend to cluster together on these lower dimensional structures called manifolds.
Okay, manifolds. So it's like, instead of being spread out all over the place, the images we care about are kind of like bunched up together in specific regions.
Exactly. It's kind of like imagine a giant crumpled up sheet. Right.
Okay, I can picture that.
The sheet itself is the high dimensional space, but the images we're interested in, they're all like concentrated along the creases and folds of that sheet. They're not just floating around randomly in the empty space.
That's a really cool way to visualize it.
Yeah.
So what's the problem with that? Why do these manifolds mess things up?
Well, the thing is, traditional score matching, which is this method for estimating the gradients of the data distribution.
Right, right.
It really struggles with these manifolds. Like, the scores become unreliable in those low-density regions, the spaces between the holds, and it makes the training really unstable.
Unstable, how?
Like, the loss function jumps all over the place. It can't seem to settle down.
So basically it's like trying to navigate a maze in the dark and just keep bumping in a wall.
Yeah, pretty much. The paper actually gives a specific example of this, where they tried to train a ResNet on CFAR 10 images using traditional score matching, and the loss just went haywire.
Oof, yeah, that's not good. So we need a new approach, something that can handle these manifolds in those tricky low-density regions.
Exactly.
And that's where these noise-conditional score networks come in.
NCSNs, yeah. That's the heart of the paper.
And they solve this problem how?
Okay, so think about it this way. Imagine you're trying to like make sense of a really blurry image.
Okay.
It's hard to see any details, right? But what if you could like gradually sharpen the image, slowly revealing more and more information?
Yeah, like starting with a super blurred version and then slowly bringing it into focus.
Exactly, and that's kind of what NCSNs do. They train a single network to estimate the scores, but at different levels of noise. So as you decrease the noise, the model learns to capture finer and finer details of the data distribution, even in those tricky, low-density regions.
So it's like solving a jigsaw puzzle, but starting with a really foggy image of the puzzle and then slowly clearing the fog away.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. As the fog lifts, the pieces start to fit together and you can see the whole picture.
That's really cool. So how does that actually work in practice? What makes NCSNs so special compared to like GANs or other generative models?
Well, for one thing, they don't require adversarial training.
Which is a huge plus, right?
Hmm.
GANs can be a real nightmare to train.
Yeah. Tell me about it. Plus, NCSNs, they give you a lot more flexibility in terms of like the architecture of your model.
Oh, so you're not limited to specific types of networks.
Nope. You can use pretty much any architecture you want.
That's pretty amazing. And I guess that makes them more adaptable to different kinds of data and problems.
Exactly. And here's another thing that's really important, especially for us AML engineers. NCSNs have this objective function that lets you directly compare different models.
And why is that so important?
Well, with GANs, it's really hard to compare different models objectively. Like, you can look at the generated images and say, oh, this one looks better, but there's no real quantitative way to measure which model is actually performing better.
Right, it's more subjective.
Exactly. But with NCSNs, you have this clear, objective way to compare different models based on their scores. It's like having a standardized benchmark.
So you can actually see which model is truly the best, not just which one looks better. That's a huge advantage for like research and development.
Absolutely. And that's just scratching the surface of what NCSNs can do.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, it really sounds like it could be a big deal for, like actually developing and deploying models. But
Yeah.
okay, so let's talk about this. Like, how do they actually do this score estimation? Like, what's going on under the hood?
So they use this really neat technique called denoising score matching.
Denoising score matching.
Okay. Yeah, and it's like, score matching, but it's way more practical, especially when you're working with like deep learning models, which can get really complex.
But it's a more efficient way to capture that gradient information.
Yeah, basically. It's like, instead of trying to like capture every single detail of the data distribution perfectly from the get-go, you start with a rough sketch and then gradually refine it.
So like starting with a blurry image and then slowly bringing it into focus.
Exactly. You're learning the overall composition first and then filling in the details as you go.
That makes sense. It's almost like, how humans learn. We don't just like absorb all the information at once. We kind of build up our understanding over time.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that actually brings me to another really interesting aspect of NCSNs, which is how they generate new samples from the learned distribution.
Oh, yeah. So once you've trained the model, how do you actually use it to create new stuff?
Well, they use this technique called annealed Langevin dynamics.
Annealed Langevin dynamics. That sounds really complicated.
It might sound a little intimidating, but it's actually based on this really cool process called simulated annealing.
Simulated annealing. That sounds familiar, but I can't quite place it.
It's actually a technique used in a lot of different fields, like metallurgy and optimization. It's all about like finding the best solution by gradually cooling a system down.
Okay, so how does that apply to, generating images or text?
Okay, so imagine you're trying to find the lowest point in a really rugged mountain range, right?
Yeah, I'm picturing it. Lots of peaks and valleys.
Right. So with simulated annealing, you start by shaking the landscape really vigorously so you can explore a wide range of possibilities.
So you're not just stuck in one valley. You can kind of jump around and see what else is out there.
Exactly. And then as you gradually reduce the shaking, you slowly settle into the deepest valley, the optimal solution.
So it's like you're exploring the space and then gradually honing in on the best solution.
Exactly. And annealed Langevin dynamics, they work in a similar way. You start with a lot of noise, and then you gradually reduce it, guiding the samples towards the true data distribution.
So it's like a guided search, but it's not just random. It's kind of systematically exploring the possibilities.
Exactly. And the results are really impressive. Like, the paper shows NCSNs achieving state-of-the-art performance on, like, MNIST, Celeba, and even CFAR-10, which is a much more challenging data set.
CFAR-10, that's the one with all the, like, pictures of animals and stuff, right?
Yep, that's the one. And they actually achieved a new state-of-the-art inception score of 8.87 on CFAR-10.
8.87. That's pretty amazing, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's better than a lot of the
Yeah.
more traditional generative models.
Yeah, it's really impressive. And it's not just about the numbers either. Like when you actually look at the images that are generated during the annealed Langevin dynamics process, it's kind of mesmerizing. You can literally see them evolve from pure noise into like coherent, realistic images.
So it's like watching the model learn to like see the world and create new things.
Yeah, it's like that. And it's not just limited to like generating pretty pictures. Like they also applied NCSNs to image inpainting, which is basically, filling in missing parts of an image.
Oh, wow. So it's like you give it an image with a hole in it and it can figure out what should go there.
Yeah, basically. And they got really good results with that too, which is really interesting because it means that NCSNs aren't just like superficially mimicking the data they're trained on.
Right. They're not just like copying and pasting pixels.
Exactly. They're actually learning meaningful representations of the data, like they're understanding the underlying structure and patterns.
So they're kind of like, filling in the gaps in our knowledge.
Yep.
Like they can see what we can't see.
Yeah, in a way. And what's even cooler is that they can handle occlusions of like arbitrary shapes. Like they're not limited to filling in like rectangular blocks of pixels or anything like that.
So it's like they can restore a torn photograph no matter how complex the damage is.
Yeah, it's kind of like that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So we've talked about like image generation, image inpainting. Are there any other like practical applications of NCSNs that, ML engineers could be excited about?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like, imagine training an NCSN on a data set of, like, your company's product designs
Okay.
and then using it to generate, like, novel designs, exploring new possibilities that, like, humans might not have even thought
So
of.
it's like an AI brainstorming partner.
Exactly. Or, like, you could use it to generate synthetic data for, training other models. Like, if you're working on a self-driving car, you could use an NCSN to generate realistic images of different driving scenarios.
That would be incredible, especially for like edge cases that are really hard to capture in the real world.
Right. Or like you could use it to augment your existing data sets, to improve the performance of your models.
Yeah, that's huge. Data augmentation is such a crucial part of like almost every AML project these days.
Exactly. And NCSNs could be a really powerful tool for that.
I mean, I'm already thinking about all the possibilities for, data augmentation.
Oh, yeah.
Like for us AML engineers, more data is almost always a good thing,
Oh,
right?
almost always.
But like collecting and labeling all that data, that can be like a huge bottleneck.
Huge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so if we could use NCSNs to like generate realistic synthetic data,
Oh, that would be a game changer.
that would be amazing.
Yeah, because they learn the like underlying distribution of the data. They can generate examples that are, actually representative of the real world.
Even with like all the noise and variations and stuff.
Yeah, they can handle that. It's like having an AI that can just create new training data for you, like on demand.
Okay, so we've got data augmentation. But what about like noisy data in general? That's
Yeah.
like a constant problem for AML engineers. Can NCSNs help with that too?
Actually, yeah, they're surprisingly good at handling noisy data.
Really?
Yeah, remember, like, they're specifically designed to deal with noise, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
they learn to distinguish between the true signal and the noise during training.
So it's like they have this built-in noise filter.
Yeah, kinda.
That's awesome, especially for things like, medical imaging or financial modeling, where like
Yeah.
even small errors can have huge consequences.
Absolutely. And then there's anomaly detection too.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah. Because NCSNs, they learn the intricacies of a data distribution so well, they're really good at spotting outliers.
So they can tell us when something's like out of place.
Yeah, exactly.
That could be huge for like fraud detection or like predictive maintenance.
All kinds of stuff.
It's like having an AI that can tell you when something's fishy.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, so we've talked about like data augmentation, noisy data, anomaly detection. I mean, it really seems like NCSNs have the potential to like address some of the most fundamental challenges we face as AM engineers.
I think so too. And the best part is, the authors have actually made their code publicly available on GitHub.
No way, really?
Yeah, it's open source.
So any AML engineer can just like download it and start experimenting with NCSNs.
Yep, go for it.
That's incredible. I mean, who knows what kind of like cool new applications people will come up with.
Yeah, that's what I'm excited about.
It's like this paper has opened up this whole new world of possibilities.
It really has. For me, like, the biggest takeaway is that NCSNs, they represent this, like, fundamental shift in how we think about generative modeling.
How so?
Well, in the past, we've been focused on, like, creating realistic images or text. But with NCSNs, it's like we're not just mimicking the data anymore. We're actually trying to understand the underlying data distributions.
We're going deeper.
Yeah, exactly. And that's huge.
I mean, this has been a really, really insightful deep dive.
I've had fun.
I think I speak for all of our AML engineer listeners out there when I say that NCSNs have definitely like piqued our interest.
Yeah, I hope so.
They're a really powerful new tool, and I can't wait to see what people do with them.
Me neither.
All right, well, that wraps up our dope dive into NCSNs.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.